Hi, my name is Lizzie Kelly. Welcome to our first annual meeting for our farmers market at 32nd and Wool. So today we're going to talk about environmentalism and doing our part. As a society, we have finally come to accept the reality of climate change that is induced by human consumption. At this point in time, we're not entirely sure of the impacts and where our planet's future lies. However, we have made lots of changes to our lifestyles, trying to not reverse, but at least slow down the rapid climate change that we're facing. Oh my God, MJ, please don't. So in recent years, we have increased recycling initiatives, placed emission tests on vehicles, switched to renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and hydropower. We've switched to battery-powered cars, compostable diningware, and all of that to promote sustainability. Words like organic and green are buzzwords in today's market. Many products are much more likely to sell if they are eco-friendly. Isn't that why we're all here today, to be more eco-friendly in our farmers market? But what do we know about these words? What is the weight behind them and the impacts of what we're doing? In other words, are these changes even helping? Are we even solving the problem? And the short answer to that question is no. We are not making a difference. As you can see, in the past 4 years, ever since the Paris Accord was signed in 2016, we have increased in atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration. And as many of you know, results in a higher overall global temperature. So despite these changes, the changes that I mentioned earlier, solar, wind, recycling, compostables, we're still projected to emit more CO2 every year and other toxins. But before we throw in the towel and despair in our possible doom, let's think about why this could be. So let's think about this. Let's take our switch from plastic to styrofoam cups and compostable cups. Take a look at this table right here, comparing the resources necessary for making a single-use hot drink container. This study is done by the scientific journal Science New Series, and it was done in 1991, before the environmental movement really took off. And so we've assumed that this idea that waste is bad, in particular waste that we can see. A styrofoam cup doesn't decompose for thousands of years, if at all, but a paper one does. And so paper is better, right? Not necessarily. So as we can see, a polyfoam cup actually requires way fewer resources, raw materials, as far as water, wood, and bark, compared to a paper cup. And additionally, in the production of styrofoam cups versus paper cups, it uses, frankly, half the amount of water necessary to make them, especially in Colorado and in the West. We're very short on water, and so why would we use something that's going to use more water? Because we have this idea that paper is better. So even though paper cups seem to be more recyclable because they're made of paper, polyfoam actually has a much higher potential for recycling after the primary use and after use, while paper cups actually have a very, very low potential, as you can see. And although paper cups decompose naturally, the initial resources it takes to make them are actually quite tremendous, both the raw materials and the emissions released from the production. And so then after production, the decomposition of these cups actually releases even further emissions, leads us to carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, which are the leading cause of climate change. So if we know that greenhouse gases are the leading cause, why on earth is this disconnect? Why do we think that paper is better? Because we can't see the waste with paper, and with polyfoam we can? Perhaps. The same is true in other aspects of environmentalism. This trend of environmentalism is absolutely everywhere, yet our idea of it is actually so skewed, and ultimately our efforts aren't really helping. So similar to our discussion on paper cups versus styrofoam cups, we have made trade-offs to what we will and will not reduce. For example, solar panels. They're everywhere now. Yes, they reduce fossil fuel consumption in our cars and homes, but do we truly know the impacts of them? So this is from a table. As we can see, over close to 100% of public support supports solar power, but very few people actually know what impacts that solar panels have. So actually, after 20 years, solar panels' life as energy conducting is over. And so we, as of right now, have no way to recycle them. And solar panels are made of very toxic elements in their elemental form, for example, cadmium, that can't be recycled, and the toxicity does not reduce over time. And so with that being said, most likely after being used, these panels will be probably shipped overseas to be disassembled by underdeveloped countries, releasing a whole new Pandora's box of environmental and ethical problems. And so what's the solution to our climate crisis? First, I guess let's discuss the source of our climate crisis. The examples of the paper cups and the solar panels demonstrates that we clearly misunderstand what can actually help reduce our carbon emissions. We essentially band-aid the problem and leave the impacts for future generations. We don't ever come up with a solution to our consumption. We only find different ways to consume to convince ourselves that what we're doing is ultimately green. And the source of our climate crisis is our misunderstanding of our impacts. And so this misunderstanding is exacerbated by these new green products, disguising themselves as eco-friendly and making us feel good by doing our part. But in reality, it's just another form of consumption. Luckily, there is a source to our problem. It's not an easy solution. However, consume less. Both styrofoam cups and compostable cups are bad, right? We can agree on something. So why don't we just not use them? Just don't support them. Bring your own cup, make your own food, make your own coffee, be self-reliant. Driving a gas car that releases CO2 or driving a Tesla that leaves a toxic and unrecyclable battery. Take the bus, carpool, or just simply drive less. Bike more, walk more, live closer to where you need to be. If we're committed to preserving the future or the earth for our future generations, we need to recognize that our consumption is the problem. And marketing new and green ways to consume will not solve our problem. But before we can take these steps, we need to know what we're getting ourselves into. And I urge you to inform yourselves. There is so much we don't know due to oversight or our consumer society or our market or economy. So we must take the first step to inform ourselves on our actual issues at hand and take action. Thank you.